Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel Amir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Mem Hey Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very top line of Mem Hey Amid Aleph with a new Siman. Siman, what's listed in here in the Shulchan Aruch as Siman Ayin Reish. Numerically it would be Reish Ayin, but we don't write Reish Ayin because Reish Ayin would be Ra. Indeed, the very first sugya in Masechtas Pesachim is a whole lengthy sugya to teach us the need for a person to always use a lashon naki, that people should always use refined speech. Speech is not a small thing. Speech is a very major thing. So we always strive to use refined speech. So we don't want to say ra. In the Gemara Pesachim, it says that the Mishnah, the very first Mishnah, Masechtas Pesachim, Arla Arba Asar Boikin Es HaChametz. Arl Arba Asar. What does Arl Arba Asar mean? It means the evening before the 14th. Or, usually people look at the word ar and they think light. Evening is not light. Indeed, you're supposed to do B'dikas Chametz. You have to do B'dikas Chametz at night. And one of the reasons you do B'dikas Chametz at night is because it's dark, and that's when an Or Haner, that's when the light of a candle is effective to help you in doing the search for chametz. So why do we say or la'arba asar? So the Gemara brings rayas from various psukim that the word ar can be used to mean nighttime as well. Why not just say Laila? Because Laila is dark. The connotation of dark is not a pleasant connotation. We always want to use a lashon naki. Therefore, the Mishnah begins or la'arba asar, not leil arba asar. So too over here, we're beginning now Siman Ayin Reish. We don't want to say Reish Ayin because that would be Ra. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Beis Yisrael Hanesuna Batzara Bashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yitziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'Oira B'Shibud L'Gula Hashta B'Gala V'Zman Kariv and Emarmein. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam. Our learning should also be a schus for three relatives of mine who are in the IDF, who have been called up to active duty. Exactly where they are, I'm not sure. Their names are Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, and Yoel ben Michal. The Rabbeinu Shalom should guard over them. Hinei Laganav L'Yishan Shemer Yisrael. The Rabbeinu Shalom should guard over them together with all of our Yiddish brothers and sisters that are in harm's way. Rabbeinu Shalom should protect Gans Klal Yisrael and bring us the Geula Shalema. Let's turn now to Siman Ayin Reish. Says the Mechaber, Loimar Mishnas Bameh Madlikin. The minig to recite the Perek, the Mishnayos of Perek Bameh Madlikin, the second Perek of Masechtas Shabbos, Friday night. Uboy Beis Seifim, and here we have two Seifim. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. The Mechaber brings down from the Torah, Noi Hagim Loimar Perek Bameh Madlikin. The minig is that Friday night we recite all of the Mishnayosin of the second parak of Masechtas Shabbos, Masechtas Bameh Madlikin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Aleph, Parak Bameh Madlikin. Why do we say Parak Bameh Madlikin Friday night? Levi sheyesh by din hadlaka. Because what do the words Bameh Madlikin mean? The words Bameh Madlikin mean, with what should we light the Neiroi Shabbos? So the whole beginning of Masechtas Bameh Madlikin is all about the halachas that we've learned previously. What kind of wicks should you use for Neiroi Shabbos? What kind of fuel should you use for Neiroi Shabbos? That's why we say it Friday night. Levi sheyesh by din hadlaka. And then additionally, in Parak Bameh Madlikin, we have Ushloisha Dvarim Sher Tzarech Adam Loimar B'Seich Beisai. There are three halachas that Chazal tell us, three things that we need to speak out in our homes on Erev Shabbos, B'Seich Beisai Erev Shabbos Im Chashecha. There are three things that we need to point out to the members of our household right before Shabbos. Isartem, did you separate maisris from the produce, the foods that you want to eat on Shabbos? Were you misakin them? Did you separate trumas and maisris properly? You can't do that on Shabbos, so you have to do it before Shabbos. Iravtem, if you live in a place where you need an eruve chatzeros, did you make an eruve chatzeros so that you should be able to carry from the house to the chatzer, from the chatzer to the house? And lastly, hadliku es haner, go light the neris. This is all recorded in Perek Bameh Madlikin, so we speak about it we recite it on Friday night. Continues the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, Vasfardim oimrim oisai kaidem tfilas arvis. The minig of the Svardim was to recite Bameh Madlikin before they would daven Ma'ariv, and the Mechaber says V'hu hanachain, and that is the proper time to recite Perek Bameh Madlikin. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Bays, Kaidem Tfilas Arvis. The Chavetz Chaim explains. He says like this: Shebimekaymoisam in the Artsei Svarad, in the locations where the Svardim lived, in those regions, Magdimin lihispalal arvis. They would daven Ma'ariv early Friday night, in accordance with the halacha that we learned earlier, that you should daven Ma'ariv early on Friday night. Tosfos Shabbos, you have to be Moisef Michael ala Shabbos. So daven Ma'ariv early. Remember, we said that they were Makabel Shabbos with the recitation of Baruch Hu. When they answered Baruch Hu by Ma'ariv, that equaled a Kabbalah Shabbos. So since we have a chiyuv of Tosfos Shabbos, Magdimin lihispalal arvis, we daven Ma'ariv early, and that was the minig Sfarad to daven Ma'ariv early. Okay, Val Yedei Kriyas Perek Zeh, and then by reciting the Perek of Ben Madlikin, Sheyikra B'Koinem, that you're going to read before Ma'ariv. So let's put 1 and 1 together, that equals 2. They're davening Ma'ariv early. Now, what does davening Ma'ariv early mean? Davening Ma'ariv early means they're davening Ma'ariv right after Plag. They're going to daven Mincha, Kabbalah Shabbos, before Plag HaMincha. They're going to daven Ma'ariv after Plag HaMincha. So they're davening Ma'ariv at a time when they're still able to do Malacha, so long as they were not yet Makabel Shabbos. That's the perfect time to recite the Perek of Bameh Madlikin. Like the Mishnah Berurah says, Vayidei Kriyas Perek Zeh Sheyikra Mikodim, by reciting the Perek of Bameh Madlikin before the Makabel Shabbos with Ma'ariv, Yeda Bameh Madlikin. They're going to read the halacha of what type of wicks they should use for their Ner Shabbos, what type of fuel they should use for Ner Shabbos. V'yizkar shloisha dvarim, and they'll remember the 3 halachas that you need to remember right before Shabbos. They'll remember to ask, Isartem, did you separate meisers? Eravtem, did you make a Ruva Chatzeros? V'yazer aleim, and they'll speak to the bnei bayis, they'll speak to their wife or the people of their household, and they'll check out these things. So why did they say Bameh Madlikin before Ma'ariv? Because that's the perfect time to remind yourself of the halachas that are negeya right before Shabbos. Now the Mishnah Berurah makes the point that the Sfardim did this because they had the minig to daven Ma'ariv early. And how about if you don't daven Ma'ariv early? Well, think about it. If you daven Ma'ariv bisman, when are you davening Ma'ariv? You're davening Ma'ariv by after Tzeisak Echavim. Now, if you're davening Ma'ariv after Tzeisak Echavim, what does it help you to say Bameh Madlikin right before you daven Ma'ariv? Even if you would say Bameh Madlikin right before Tzeisak Echavim and then daven Ma'ariv right after Tzeisak Echavim, you're still saying Bameh Madlikin during Ben Hashmoshes. Remember, right before Tzeisak Echavim is Vadai Laila. Right before Tzeisak Echavim is Ben Hashmoshes. What does it help to say Bameh Madlikin during Ben Hashmoshes? During Ben Hashmoshes, you're not lighting neiros anymore. You have to light the neiros before Ben Hashmoshes. Remember, you have a chiyuv of Tosfos Shabbos. In order to be Mekayim Tosfos Shabbos, you have to be Makabel Shabbos during a time that's still Vadai Yoim. So you got to be lighting your neiros before Ben Hashmoshes. So once it's Ben Hashmoshes, it doesn't help you to say Bameh Madlikin anymore. It's too late. That's why the Chavetz Chaim says, why was it the minig of Svardim to recite Bameh Madlikin before Ma'ariv? Because the Svardim davened Ma'ariv early. They davened Ma'ariv right after Plag. Now, after Plag HaMincha, you're still allowed to do Malacha. You could do Malacha until you start Ma'ariv. Once you start Ma'ariv, now you will Makabel Shabbos. But if you say Bameh Madlikin before you start Ma'ariv, you're saying Bameh Madlikin at a time that you could still light Hadlakas Neiros of Shabbos. You're saying Bameh Madlikin at a time that you could still separate Meisros. You're saying Bameh Madlikin at a time that you could still make it a Ruvi Chatzeros. So that's why they were nizar to say Bameh Madlikin before Ma'ariv. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. And he says, Valkain, therefore, Kasav HaShulchan Aruch to Hu Hanachain. This is why the Shulchan Aruch says, yes, this is the proper time to say Bameh Madlikin, to la'akat tfilas arvis my nafkamina. Even according to the Svardim, that davened Ma'ariv after Plag, once they davened Ma'ariv, they were Makabel Shabbos. Now you're going to say Bameh Madlikin? Oh, so you're going to remind yourself to take Meisros? Too late. You were Makabel Shabbos already. You're going to remind yourself to make it a Ruva Chatzeros? Too late. It's already Shabbos. You're going to remind yourself what kind of wicks to use for Hadlakas Neiros? Too late. You already lit. Okay, so we understand the minig of saying Bameh Madlikin when you could still do malacha before Ma'ariv. But how about the places that have the minig to say Bameh Madlikin after Ma'ariv? What's the point? We're saying it's pointless. Most of us, what's our minig? Our minig is we daven Kabbalah Shabbos. After Kabbalah Shabbos, we say Bameh Madlikin. What does it help to say Bameh Madlikin? We were already Makabal Shabbos. So why are we saying Bameh Madlikin after Kabbalah Shabbos? So the Chavetz Chaim is coming over here to be metaritz the minig. He's telling you why people have that minig. The places that have the minig to recite Bameh Madlikin after Ma'ariv, otherwise known as after Kabbalah Shabbos, Kasav b'minhagei mahara kloizner. In the Minhagei Mara Kloizner, it is written, Hatam, the reason is, Kadesh im ya'acher adam mili hispalel. You know why the minig became to say Bameh Madlikin, even though it's already after Ma'ariv? The same reason that we had previously, why they instituted the bracha achas me'ein sheva. This was another delaying tactic. In case somebody came late to davening, we want to make sure he shouldn't have to walk home alone, so we created a delay in davening. What's the delay? Say Bameh Madlikin. Bameh Madlikin is fart negayah to Friday Shabbos, even though it's not going to help you anymore because you were Makabel Shabbos, but it is in Yonah D'Yoma. It is pertinent. We're talking about Adlakas Deresh Shel Shabbos. We're talking about things that you have to do on Erev Shabbos. So, okay, we needed a delaying tactic. We came up with this idea of saying Bameh Madlikin. If somebody came late to davening, he should have time to complete his davening while the rest of the tzibur is reciting Bameh Madlikin, and now he'll be able to go home together with them, and he won't be in sakana. Therefore, if that's the reason to say Bameh Madlikin, so then, if it's Shabbos Chalamayid, there's no reason to say Bameh Madlikin. Why? Because at Chalamayid, we don't expect anybody to be coming late to shul. Nobody's working on Chalamayid, so nobody worked on Erev Shabbos. So why would they be coming late to shul? So there's no reason for a delaying tactic. Kasav Abach, the Bach writes, Sheyesh loymar Bameh Madlikin achar kiddush. The Bach writes, if you remember, in the previous year, in Siman Reish Samach Tes, we learned about the minig to recite Kiddush in shul on Friday night. All right, so now we have two things that are scheduled to happen after Ma'ariv in shul. One is Bameh Madlikin, another one is Kiddush. Which one comes first? Now, you can't use the golden rule of Tadr v'she'ena Tadr Tadr Kaidim because they're both every Friday night. So you don't have a Tadr v'she'ena Tadr. So which one comes first? Do we say Bameh Madlikin first, or do we make Kiddush first? And again, this story the Kiddush in shul. So the Bach writes, Sheyesh loymar Bameh Madlikin achar Kiddush. The Bach writes that we should say Bameh Madlikin after Kiddush. Why? The Yula Yoima Adif. Because what takes precedence? Bringing in Shabbos. Now, we already were Makabel Shabbos, but let's remember that Kiddush is Vikarasa la Shabbos Einig, the proclamation to proclaim that it is now Shabbos, Berabim. That's what Kiddush is. So that is an inyan of bringing in Shabbos. That takes precedence over just reciting Bameh Madlikin, which, according to the minig to say Bameh Madlikin after Ma'ariv, it's only a delay tactic, so that the people who are still davening should be able to go home with everybody else. So, Yule Yuma Adif, to bring in Shabbos, that takes precedence over saying Bameh Madlikin. Now, the Bach brings just a very interesting raya from the Torah himself. Look how the Torah set up Shulchan Aruch. First, we have Siman Reish Samach Tes, which tells us the halach of making Kiddush in shul Friday night. Then we have Siman Ayin Reish that discusses Bameh Madlikin. So clearly making Kiddush takes precedence over Bameh Madlikin. However, the Mishnah Berurah points out, in our regions, in our regions, the minig is, even in the places where they have the minig to make Kiddush in shul, they say Bameh Madlikin first. Bameh Madlikin is in the Siddur, in the Nusach HaTfilah. Most of us say it between Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv. So we're saying Bameh Madlikin first, we're only making Kiddush after Ma'ariv. Because of the Prisha writes, Hatam, the reason why we say Bameh Madlikin before Kiddush, the ner beisoy v'kiddush hayoim, because we learned earlier in Siman Reis Samach Gimel, if somebody has very, very limited financial resources and he's faced with a choice, what should I spend money on? Should I spend money on buying candles or oil for Ner Shabbos, or should I spend the available money on wine for Kiddush? Which one takes precedence? We said that the Ner Shabbos takes precedence. Now really, that was a Pella, because the Chiv of Kiddush is a Daraisa. Ner Shabbos is a Darabanan. So why are we giving precedence to the Darabanan of Ner Shabbos before the Daraisa of Kiddush? The Mishnah Berurah in Reis Samach Gimel explained, the reason is because to be B'kaim your Chiv Daraisa of Kiddush, you could do that in your Shemon Esrei. In Shemon Esrei, you said Vayechulu. So you could already be B'kaim your Chiv Daraisa of Kiddush with Vayechulu in Shemon Esrei. Even at home, for B'nai Beisai, you could be Mekayim the Chiv Daraisa of Kiddush. You could do Kiddush ala Pas. And Pas you're going to have, because you have to have Mozen for your Sudai. So you're going to have Pas. So you'll be Mekadosh ala Pas. So therefore, we're going to give precedence to the Ner Shel Shabbos, which are also an Indian of Shalom Bayis. We're going to give precedence to the Ner Shel Shabbos. Comes out, says the Prisha, that the halachically, it would seem that Ner Shel Shabbos takes precedence over Kiddush. Since Ner Shel Shabbos takes precedence over Kiddush, the recitation of Bameh Madlikin that discusses Hadlakas Ner Shel Shabbos takes precedence over Kiddush as well. And we recite Bameh Madlikin earlier. We do it after Kabbalah Shabbos, before Ma'ariv, and we make Kiddush after Ma'ariv. Now we go to Sif Beis. Says the Machaber, Yesh she'ein oimrim oisai b'yom tov shachal lihiyos be'erev Shabbos. There are those that do not recite Bameh Madlikin when Friday is Yom Tov. So we just had this now, a couple of days ago, at least from when I'm recording this share. We had Rosh Hashanah was a 3-day Yom Tov. We had Rosh Hashanah was Thursday, Friday, followed by Shabbos. So the Mechaber says over here, and he brings this down again from the Torah, that you don't say Bameh Madlikin when Erev Shabbos is a Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Gimel, Shachal Liyos Be'erev Shabbos. Again, what's the rationale? We're assuming now that the reason for Bameh Madlikin is because it's a delay tactic. So people should be able to finish their davening. The stragglers should be able to finish their davening and go home with everybody else. Well, again, in that case, if Erev Shabbos was Yom Tov, nobody was working. If nobody was working, there was no reason for them to come late to shul. So we don't have to worry about stragglers. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says here, a nice Katan Gimel. Levisha ein yachaloim. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Actually, the Mishnah Berurah says something else. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you know why you don't say Bameh Madlikin? So funny. I was sure that that's what he said. Okay, listen, I'm wrong. What can I tell you? Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Gimel. You know why you don't say Bameh Madlikin when Friday was a Yom Tov? Says the Mishnah Berurah, L'fisha ein yachaloimar isartem. One of the things that are pointed out in the Mishnah in Bameh Madlikin is that you need to turn to your wife, to the people of your house, and you have to ask them, isartem, were you mafresh maisris from the produce, from the food that we're going to want to eat on Shabbos? Well, you can't ask your B'nai Beisai, you can't ask them isartem on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov you're not allowed to separate maisros. The same way you're not allowed to separate maisros on Shabbos, you're not allowed to separate maisros on Yom Tov. Incidentally, we've mentioned this before, but why is it that you can't separate maisros on Shabbos or Yom Tov? Because it is similar to tikkun moneh. It's like repairing a keli. Indeed, when we talk about being mafresh trumas and maisers, we say that by being mafresh trumas and maisers, you are misakein the food. You fix, you repair the food. In what way are you repairing it? Well, until you're mafresh trumas and maisers, it's not available for eating. Now that you were mafresh trumas and maisers, now you prepared it and you made it available for eating. That's the biggest repair that you could possibly do to food. It wasn't edible before. You weren't allowed to eat it. Now you are allowed to eat it. So it's similar to tikkun moneh, so you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov or on Shabbos. So says the Mishnah Berurah here, a nice Katan Gimel, there's no reason. You can't say, it's inappropriate to say Bameh Madlikin if Friday is a Yom Tov. Levisha ein yachaloim isartem, because you can't say isartem, did you take maisers? She'ein masrin b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to take maisers on Yom Tov. V'chein b'Yom Tov shechal b'Shabbos mishum loy plug. And if Shabbos is Yom Tov, even if Friday is not Yom Tov, if Shabbos is Yom Tov, you also don't say Bameh Madlikin Friday night. Why? Because it's a loy plug. We don't want to make a difference between what the halacha is if Yom Tov is Erev Shabbos or Yom Tov is Shabbos. So since it's inappropriate to say it if Yom Tov is Erev Shabbos, we also don't say it if Yom Tov is on Shabbos. Mishum loy plug. Continues the Mechaber, second line down near the end of the line, says the Mechaber v'yesh, and there are those, he brings this down from the Ma'ari Abuav. He says, v'yesh she'ein omer ma'aseh b'Shabbos shel Chanukah. There are also those that don't say Bameh Madlikin on Shabbos Chanukah. The reason for this is very interesting. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Dalet shel Chanukah. You know why? Mipnei sheniskar ba psul shmonim shehem asurim b'Shabbos. In Bameh Madlikin, we're going to talk about all the different types of oil and fuel that you're not allowed to use for Ner Shel Shabbos, but you are allowed to use them for Ner Shel Chanukah. So if we get up on Shabbos Chanukah and we say, you're not allowed to use this type of oil, you're not allowed to use that type of oil, and we're pointing out that you're not allowed to use them for Ner Shel Shabbos, but you are allowed to use them for Ner Chanukah, it's a shtickle of bizoyin to Ner Shel Chanukah. We're like putting down Ner Chanukah. Oh, Shabbos, you can't use these oils. Yeah, Chanukah you could. It sounds like Chanukah is like a step down. It's like a little bit lesser than Ner Shel Shabbos. It's a shtickle of bezoyin. We don't want to be mevazeh chas v'chalila the Ner Shel Chanukah. So, like the Mishnah Berurah says, they should just go up so shmanim shem asurim b'Shabbos v'loi b'Chanukah. Now there are those, you note, the Mishnah Berurah said this is a yesh. There's yesh she'ein omer ma'aseh b'Shabbos shel Chanukah. But there are those that do say Bameh Madlikin on Shabbos Chanukah. How come they're not concerned with this bezoyin of Ner Shel Chanukah? The reason is because when you think into it, you realize that the fact that you're allowed to use these oils on Chanukah when you're not allowed to use them on Shabbos is not a denigration of Chanukah in any way, shape, or form. Because you have to understand what it's based on. What is it based on? The oils that you're not allowed to use on Shabbos, the reason you're not allowed to use them is because they don't make a nice, beautiful, steady flame. Now, that's not an Indian of Hiddur Mitzvah. That's not why you're not allowed to use them. The reason you're not allowed to use them is because since they don't make a steady flame, we're afraid somebody might be reading something by the lights of the Ner Shabbos. Then the flame is going to start flickering. So Shemiyata es haner, he might come to manipulate the lamp or to manipulate the wicks. And by doing that, he'll be over on the Issa Daraisa of HaTorah, making the flame burn brighter, or Kiboi, extinguishing the flame a little bit. So therefore, we have to disallow the use of these oils because of the Chash of Shemiyata es haner. Now, the reason this is a problem is because you're allowed to read by the light of Ner Shel Shabbos. Indeed, what's the purpose of the Ner Shel Shabbos? The purpose of the Ner Shel Shabbos is illumination. That's the purpose of the Ner Shel Shabbos. Shalom bayis. You shouldn't walk around stumbling and stubbing your toe. The house should be nice and lit up. So the whole purpose is illumination. Now contrast that to Ner Shel Chanukah. Are you allowed to read by the Ner Shel Chanukah? No. Also, lehishtamesh bahem. You're not allowed to make use of the Ner Shel Chanukah. So the Ner Shel Chanukah have a chumrah. They're more stringent than the Ner Shel Shabbos. So they're not a step down. In a sense, they're actually a step above. They have a chumrah above Ner Shel Shabbos. Ner Shel Shabbos you're allowed to use. Ner Shel Chanukah you're not allowed to use. Now the reason you're not allowed to use Ner Shel Chanukah is because it has to be nicker, has to be recognizable that they're not for illumination. It has to be recognizable that they're there to publicize the nace of Chanukah, that they're not there for illumination. But the bottom line is, you're allowed to use oils that don't make a steady flame for Chanukah because of this chumrah, because there's no shash shemiyat es haner. Even on Shabbos Chanukah, we're not afraid that you're going to manipulate the neiros of Chanukah because you're not allowed to read by them. We're afraid you're going to manipulate the Ner Shabbos because you are allowed to read by it. So once somebody understands the halacha, he understands, yeah, we're not allowed to use those oils for Shabbos because there's a chash shemiyat es haner. You're allowed to use those neiros. You're allowed to use these oils for Neres Chanukah, not because Neres Chanukah are a step down, no, because Neres Chanukah are a step up. Also, lehishtamish behem, to have a chumrah. So it actually points out a chumrah in Ner Shel Chanukah, not a kula. And therefore, those shittas hold that this logic does not apply. Continues, says the Ramah now. Haga, ve'ein noig in kein b'Chanukah. Indeed, the Ramah says, we're not noig that we don't say Bameh Madlikin on Shabbos Chanukah. We do say Bameh Madlikin on Shabbos Chanukah. Ub'Shabbos Chol Hamoed ein omer ma'aseh, but on Shabbos Chol Hamoed we do not say Bameh Madlikin. V'chein b'Yom Tov shechal lihiyos b'Shabbos, and so too when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, like we already said in the Mishnah Berurah, we also do not say Bameh Madlikin ein omer ma'aseh. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting hay b'Shabbos v'chein b'Yom Kippurim in Yonah de Yoma this year. Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos. V'chein b'Yom Kippurim shechal b'Shabbos ein omer ma'aseh. We do not say Bameh Madlikin. Turning now to Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, we're going to start. We'll do Sif Aleph over here. We're not even going to do all the Mishnah Berurah. We'll do one Mishnah Berurah here on Sif Aleph. The next Mishnah Berurah is going to take up most of tomorrow's page in the Dirshu schedule. So we're going to do Sif Aleph with Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Aleph. Din Kiddush al Hayayin, Dine Kiddush al Hayayin, the halachas that govern making Kiddush Friday night on Yayin, Uba Yud Zayin Seifim, a beautiful siman over here discussing all of the halachas of Kiddush on Shabbos, says the Mechaber Sif Aleph. Kishayavai lebeisai, when you come home to your house Friday night after davening Ma'ariv, Yemaher lechol miyad, you should hurry up to eat your Suda right away. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Aleph. Yemaher lechol. Says the Chavetz Chaim, what does that mean? Yemaher lechol. It sounds from the Mechaber that the point is that you must eat your Suda right away. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's not really the point. It is true that you're going to have to eat your Suda right away, but the point isn't the eating of the Suda. Hainu lekadesh, says the Mishnah Berurah. Really, the underpinning of this halacha is that you need to make Kiddush right away. Hainu lekadesh. Why do you have to make Kiddush right away? Because we want to be nizar, we want to take care that we should proclaim Shabbos as close to possible as when it came in. So we went to shul, we were Makabel Shabbos, we davened Ma'ariv, now we want to come home right away, the Karasal Shabbos Oinig, we want to come home right away and proclaim Shabbos in Kiddush. Yizkar Shabbos, so that you should mention Shabbos based Tchilas Knisasai, at the beginning of when Shabbos comes in. The Chalkama de Maktabinan Le Tfei Odif, because the sooner we do it, the better it is. Now, once you made Kiddush, Tzarech Lechel Miyad. Now that I'm telling you that you have to make Kiddush right away, now it comes out that you also have to eat right away. Because in Reish Ayin Gimel, we're going to learn the halacha that part and parcel of the halacha of Ein Kiddush Ela B'Mokim Suda is that you have to make Kiddush and you have to have the Suda right away. Ein Kiddush Ela B'Mokim Suda does not mean that if the Suda is in the dining room, you have to make Kiddush in the dining room. It's not a din in the Mokim. So that maybe you would think, okay, I'll come home, I'll make Kiddush, I'll drink a mole lugma, a cheekful of yayin so that I'm yoytze Kiddush, and then we'll go prepare the Suda, we'll eat the Suda an hour from now, or maybe we'll go for a walk, and what's the problem? I was B'Kaddish B'Makom Suda. I made Kiddush in the dining room. No, we're going to see in Reish Ayin Gimel, that's not the halacha. Ain't Kiddush Ela B'Makom Suda means you make Kiddush and you eat your Suda. The karos ala Shabbos oinig. You make Kiddush by the oinig. You make Kiddush by the oinig Shabbos, by the Suda. Having an hour break between Kiddush and the Suda, that's not called Kiddush b'makom Suda. So it comes out over here that when the Mechaber said that when you come home, you should hurry up to eat right away, really, it's come home and make Kiddush right away. But once you're going to make Kiddush right away, you have to eat right away because you have to eat together with your Kiddush. So again, reading the Mishnah Berurah for the beginning, Hainu likadesh, kadesh yizkar Shabbos beis tchilas knisasai, dechal kama demakdamina leitvei odif. Umikevan shekidesh, once you make Kiddush, tzarech lecha miyad, you have to eat right away. Kamavur b'siman Reish Ayin Gimel, Sif Gimel b'Hagah, like the Ramah is going to tell us in Reish Ayin Gimel, by the halacha of in Kiddush, ela b'makom Suda. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, let's say you come home and you're not hungry. Now, you're supposed to eat the Shabbos Suda b'teyavon, We want you to eat the Shabbos Suda with an appetite. Remember, we learned earlier the halacha, how careful you have to be not to eat too much on Erev Shabbos. If you remember, I railed against the minig of Tayamel for that reason, because it's a mefurish halacha that you're not allowed to eat a Suda on Erev Shabbos that's bigger, more significant, larger than your typical Suda, than your typical Tuesday lunch. You don't eat a bigger lunch on Friday than you eat on Tuesday. Why? Because part and parcel of Einig Shabbos is that you should eat your Suda Shabbos b'teyavain, with an appetite. So what happens if you come home and you're not hungry? For whatever reason, you're just not hungry. If I eat now, I'm not going to eat b'teyavain. What do I do then? Says the Chavetz Chaim, if you have no appetite to eat, then you could wait to make Kiddush until you're hungry. Because because we have to do a balancing act over here. On the one hand, we want you to make Kiddush right away, because we said the sooner you proclaim Shabbos and Kiddush, the better. On the other hand, we also want you to eat your Suda Shabbos b'teyavain, and that's a very, very big inyan. So, okay, as far as proclaiming Shabbos, you already proclaimed Shabbos in your Shemona Esrei. Friday night, you said Vayichulu in your Shemona Esrei. So really, the inyan of Kiddush, you already were Mekayim, really, the inyan of Kiddush. So you don't have an appetite, wait until your appetite comes. So Yokal Haptim Lekadish Chiyirav, Shekra Zokar Shabbos B'Tfilosei B'Beis HaKnesses, V'Yoytze B'Zeh Mitzvah Sei Daraisa Lo Rambam. According to the Rambam, you were already Yoytze the Mitzvah Daraisa of Kiddush when you davened Shemona Esrei, so you could postpone your Kiddush until you have an appetite. Ukidal come on, and we're going to learn more about this later on. Nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, Nira, it would seem, let's say you're going to create a shalom bayis problem over here. Was you're going to come home and you're going to say, I'm not ready to eat. And your wife, she went and she got up and she prepared the Suda and she set the table and she's all proud and all excited. Oh, look, I have everything ready. And then you're going to walk in and say, nah, I'm not hungry. And you're going to sit down in the living room and doze off on the couch. Not right. So that's going to create a problem, a shalom bayis problem. Then says the Chavetz Chaim, or you have servants, I guess, Yiddish helpers. Not talking about the Palaka. If you have Yiddish people that work for you, I guess, that in your household, or you have guests, or befrat oirech ani, maybe you have a guest who's an ani, so he didn't eat a lot on Erev Shabbos. Lo ya'acher b'kol gavni. Then do not delay your Suda even if you have no appetite. Because since they're counting on you, they're not eating until you eat. They're starving. This ani hasn't eaten all day. And now you're holding off your Suda because you don't have an appetite. Your wife is all excited that she got the table ready, she got everything ready before you came home. Now you're postponing the Suda. Then lo yuchal akvam, you can't hold them back. You want to be Mekayim the mitzvah min hamuvchar. You want to eat your Shabbos Suda b'teyavain, so you're going to make everybody else in the house hungry. No siree. You can't do that. You have to be considerate of other people, and it's time to go start the Suda. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Bays is a very lengthy Mishnah Berurah that takes up most of tomorrow's page, so we're going to hold that off for tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's for Parnaset Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gael Tzedek B'Meherav Yameinu. Amen. Be well.